everybody. Welcome to the very first episode of the Daily Prompt. And thank you so much for joining me. If you stick with me, not just today, but throughout this series, you're going to absolutely transform the way you think about creativity, about storytelling, about screenwriting, about any creative endeavor, really, and how to advance that to a genuinely professional level. This is a new show, a new series, specifically designed to encourage a more open mind, a more expanded imagination, and physical daily action. It has long been my contention. I've been teaching writers for nearly 20 years now, and it has long been my contention that the number one reason that the vast majority of people will never actually succeed in their ambitious goal is not because they don't have the talent, it's not because they can't develop the skills, it's because they don't actually take action. And if they do take action, they don't continue to persist when the going gets tough. So to help you understand how to get you over your own roadblocks, to help you get where you're trying to go, to help you achieve whatever this grand goal and vision, career aspiration, societal aspiration, whatever it is that's in your head right now, in order to help you achieve that, my goal here with this series is to present you with new daily insights, perspectives, tools, tips, techniques, tricks. I want to teach you stuff. I want to show you perspective. I want to guide you. I can't guide you step by step through the process, and I'll explain why, but what I can do is encourage daily action each day. So to start off today, day one, Monday, if you're starting this on a Monday, day one, what we're going to do today is you're going to capture your idea and actually make it tangible, put it in written form. Now, it doesn't have to be in written form, but you need to capture it in some form. I'm going to give you what I'm going to do throughout this series. Part of the reason for the series is to share with you my journey. So I didn't want to just do some simple vlog each day where I'm like, well, I woke up today and I went to the store and I bought something and thanks for joining me. Like, I want to make sure that my goal is to make sure that each episode of this series provides you with real-world, practical, usable value. Okay, so the way that I'm going to try to do that is to share with you my day, to share with you what I'm doing, and to present it to you, excuse me, in a way that that becomes something usable for you. Now, just as a little side note, that little cough that I've got, I've been planning to start this today for about a month now. And of course, last week we sent my kid to daycare for the very first time, and he got his very first cold, and he has spread it to us. So of course, day one, should I push this back a week? No, I'm not going to push this back a week. Just like you shouldn't push back a week your goals and your ambitions. I want this to be vlog by example, right? So the goal here is for me to share with you what I'm doing as a way to inspire you, as a way to give you perspective, as a way to help you understand the big picture of where you're trying to go. Now, I'm going to assume that I'm talking to people who want to write screenplays, or who want to create movies, or who want to design stories. That is going to expand as we go along, because as I'm going to show you, stories are everywhere. Everything is a story. And story applies to every situation in life. So this should be applicable to everyone. But I want to start off with the people who are here to learn screenwriting, because if you understand my goal and my journey, it will help you get where you're trying to go, whether you ever decide to join me in my journey and my adventure or not. So let's start off with the very first daily prompt, and that is to capture your idea. One of the most important lessons and ideas and insights that I can give you is that the idea in your head is and will always be an idea in your head. You have an idea for a movie, you have an idea for a career, you have an idea for some dream, something that you want to pursue, that you want to reach for. If you do not ever take action, physical action, to make that happen, that idea will always remain an idea in your head. Obviously, right? But we don't live as though that's obvious. So many writers that I've talked to along the way don't treat it that way. You have to take that idea and you have to make it tangible. You have to make it real. Now, here's the other thing. If you do take that idea in your head and you make it tangible and you make it real, what happens is now all of a sudden that idea meets with reality. That idea meets with the real world. You're going to look at it on the page and you're going to see that that is not quite as good as it was in here. It's harder to achieve than what it felt like in here. That's why the dreams are sometimes, we just like to live in the dream, because once we try to make it real, suddenly it's not as good. Sometimes it's not as fun, not as fulfilling, right? So as soon as you take that idea and you put it on the page, it becomes real. And so you start to face conflict. You start to face obstacles and challenges and the real world difficulties of actually making that thing real. And so as you start to address those challenges and address those differences between your imagination and the reality of that imagination, you start to adapt and go down that path toward making it actually real. And so what happens is, if you ever actually achieve the idea that was in your head, you come to realize that the idea in your head and the idea that you really achieved are actually quite different, which means that that idea that was in your head is and will always be an idea in your head. Now, part of the reason for this is something I talked about in my TED Talk, which is that ideas spark ideas. It's the way the human brain works. When you have an idea, it triggers neurons and it creates a new idea. If you watch a TV show, it sparks an idea in your head for your own TV show. You see something out at the park, you may, if you start to think in story terms, you may spark new story ideas just by going through a walk in the park, which is why so many writers who are blocked go for a walk in the park, because ideas spark ideas. It's the way our brain works, okay? So to help you understand sort of my perspective on all this, what I want to do to help you understand how to go about actually physically doing this prompt, I want to tell you about the idea in my head. So the idea in my head is the reason for this series in the first place. What I'm trying to achieve here is that I have, since I was, for about 20 years, for more than that, but for a while now, I have had this idea to build an independent film studio. My background is that I was raised in Los Angeles. I had the film industry all around me. At 8 years old, I was dreaming of being in movies. At 12 years old, I actually started. I got myself an acting agent and all this kind of stuff. Started doing TV shows and movies and commercials and all that stuff. And then fell in love with the production process. And as I fell in love with the production process, I realized that I'd rather make movies even than watch them. I just love the process of making stuff. And I ended up working for a brief spell, about 6 months, for a company called, at the time it was called Concord New Horizons, and it was a company owned and sort of run by a guy named Roger Corman. Now, Roger Corman is known as sort of the king of the B films. He would make these sort of schlocky genre, exploitative kind of film straight to video at the time, right? And it's not the kind of movies that I want to make, but at the end of the day, it was the most fantastic learning experience. I learned everything. I was able to do lots of different jobs and subsequently went on to do all the different jobs on various productions. So I've seen all aspects of the production process and I love all of it. But in the span of about 6 months, I worked on about 5 different films. And so when I got really burnt out in LA and moved to Australia, when I got to Sydney, I said, we could do something like that here. I don't want to make the sort of this schlocky sort of genre films, but I want to make something that sort of aspires higher. But that model of making multiple films, lower budget initially, and making multiple projects and using those to continue funding the cycle, I thought this is sort of the business model that I want to try to achieve. So I started looking for screenplays in Australia. This is back in the late 90s. I started looking for screenplays and I couldn't find anything. People in the screenwriting world in Australia, at least at the time, was nowhere near what it is in LA, for example. So people were like, screenplays? What? So lots of people had ideas. Lots of people would pitch me their little stories and what have you. But nobody had screenplays that I could actually go out and get money for, package, send into production. They just weren't ready by any stretch. So what I started to do at that time was start teaching screenwriting from the producer's perspective to try to help people take those ideas and turn them into stuff that I could actually use. And that sort of sent me down this sort of long-winded path where I tried to reverse engineer the creative process so that I could get writers from idea to story to screenplay. In the big Hollywood studios, at least at the time, there were these script development departments where, you know, they'd make all these profits from the blockbuster films and they'd funnel parts of those revenues into the story development part of the process. So they'd be developing new projects along the way. But there's nothing like that in the independent world. In the independent world, if you submit a project and it's not actually viable, then the producer has to decide, do I want to spend money on trying to make this viable, or is this something I can't quite see getting there anyway, or this writer is not going to be capable of getting it where it needs to be, or any of an... And so you end up saying no. As a producer, you end up saying no to projects that, even if I like that idea, we're too far away. We're not going to be able to get there. So I sat down and what I tried to do was build this development process, right? The screenwriting world, the way screenwriting education works today and has even since back then, was teaching you story formula basically as its core. So like, let's take your idea, let's turn it into a story. Here's what goes where on which page. And the problem is, whenever I would see, as a producer, see scripts coming in that followed those formulas, the great challenge is that I can predict exactly what's going to happen. I can't use this project. What I needed, particularly in Australia, and which is where this all sort of evolved from, is you need stuff that's with an Australian mentality. You need some stuff that's not quite Hollywood. You need something that has its own voice and has its own sort of way of doing things. And so it wasn't about creating some formula, because not all ideas are going to fit into some formula. Instead, it was about creating a process, right? So that writers could start here and go through that process. Now, I'm trying to be as succinct as I can. Future episodes, I think, will be shorter, but I need you to understand this point to really understand how to capture that idea in your head. So what I did at the time was I built this thing. It's called Fast Screenplay, and it guides writers step by step through this whole process. Now, the problem that I've had since then is that the vast majority of people quit along the way, because in order to get you from idea to not just a screenplay, but a legitimately viable screenplay producers can say yes to, I need you to go through increasingly challenging obstacles to develop not just skills, but professional level skills. And so the problem is that along the way, what I started to find over the past 10 years or so, since I've gone down this road, is that the vast majority of writers quit. They get to some point along the way, usually the rewrite phase, but it's often before that. And they just sort of go, oh, this is too hard, or I don't feel like I'm getting where I'm trying to go, so I'm going to quit. And that really sucks for me because I can't build my independent film studio if the writers quit along the way. So what I've decided to do is, what I realized is, and this is sort of, I guess, maybe a bonus idea in the head, is that what I think was missing was an incentive. If you have that idea in your head and you're going to capture that and make that physical and make that something that you're going to actually say, this is what I'm going to pursue. The problem is, if you don't have a reason, if you don't have a compelling incentive to actually go through it, then when that idea meets with reality, then the obstacles and the challenges are going to come up. And as they do, there will be a point at which it's sufficiently hard, sufficiently difficult that you're going to give up on your goal. Now, this vlog series is all about helping you take action. So the very first action you need to do is to capture the idea that's in your head and make it tangible, and give yourself an incentive. Understand why you want to achieve this thing so that you will actually follow through, knowing full well that there will be big challenges ahead. If there are big challenges ahead, what is going to be the fuel that's going to push you through that? Okay, so what I've decided to do for my fast screenplay thing is create this thing called the writer's room at the end. So if people go through this, and I'm claiming that they're going to have all these skills, but most people quit, so we don't actually have a whole lot of success stories out of it, right? So to encourage people to go all the way through that, what if at the end we get 8 to 10 writers in a group, and each one of them develops a project, and all of them contribute to all the other projects? And then at the end of a season, so like 4, 6 months, however long it takes to develop those 8 to 10 projects, we actually choose one of the films, or more if they're viable, and we actually go out and we physically produce them. That's my big idea, is that we're going to give an incentive to writers to go all the way through this process, so that we can actually start this film studio idea that I had many, many years ago, right? So my idea has evolved as it's gone along. It's turned from, I want to build an independent film studio, to I could actually build an independent film studio to help writers learn the process, and in so doing, do what I love most, which is making films, and help writers get what they need to actually be able to sell films, right? So the problem with most screenwriting education is that it's all focused on the written screenplay. It's all focused on getting an agent or getting it into the hands of a producer, all that kind of stuff. And it's usually some formulaic approach, but which doesn't work. It doesn't work at scale, because not all ideas fit into a formula. And at the end of the day, the thing that's missing is that people aren't learning how to write for production. So what I want to make this series about, look, I'm not suggesting that you have to join me in that process. Obviously, I'd love it if you did, but that's not what this is about. What I'm going to do in this series is I'm going to show you my journey from I've built this thing, now I'm going to start working with writers, and we're going to start actually making films. I'm going to take you through that to give you the daily inspiration, to give you the daily expanded perspective, to give you daily tips and techniques and tricks and suggestions and all that sort of stuff. Does that make sense? So my goal always is win-win situation. I want to give you some value that, in giving you the value, helps me as well to achieve the thing that I believe that if I can get further toward my goal, then I'm in a better and better position to help you get to your goal. Okay, so we'll talk a lot more about all this kind of stuff. I'm sure I'm going to expand on all this kind of stuff as we go along. If you have any questions about any of it, pop it in the comments below. If you have comments about it, including hate, if you think I'm an idiot or crazy or whatever, pop it in the comments below, because I want to understand the negativity so that I can understand where maybe my own flaws and weaknesses are, so that I can maybe go, oh, that person's actually pointed out something really interesting. I need to adjust, because the only way we're actually going to get through those challenges and obstacles that come up is if we face them honestly. Right? So the only way to face them honestly is to first take that idea that's in your head, capture it, harness it, make it physical, make it tangible, write it out on a piece of paper, do more if you have more time. Everybody who's watching this comes from a little bit of a different perspective. So if you're already halfway through your project, maybe you've lost a little bit of the love for your project, capture again what the idea was. Not just necessarily the idea for the story. Maybe it's the idea for your career. Maybe it's the idea of what you're trying to achieve. Make sense? We'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow when I talk about the master plan. But for now, identify that idea, identify that perspective, and then figure out what is the incentive that's going to push you all the way. Because if you can do those things, you're going to start to really make the idea, the dream in your head, you're going to make it real. And that's what I want this series to do for you. Whether you join me or not, I want to make sure that this series helps you take that idea in your head and make it actually physically real. So if you need to know anything, you have any questions at all, pop them in the comments. Other than that, here's the way this works. Each of these is going to be hopefully shorter than this, but each of these is going to be giving you a daily prompt, giving you what's happening in my life or my perspective, tell you a little bit about my story or whatever, so that I can show you how that turns into a prompt for you. We give you that prompt, and then at the end of the video, don't watch whatever's suggested next, or don't watch other videos or episodes of the show. When you finish, just take a moment, think about what I've presented here, think about the ideas and the concepts, process it, filter it through your own perspective, what your own approach to all this is and should be, and then take physical action. It's not until you take action that this stuff becomes real. I want to make it real. I want you to make it real, okay? So thank you for joining me. Thank you for watching. We're going to see you tomorrow after you leave some comments below and after you take action, all right? Thanks for watching. See you then.